So we are talking about this last 1 year of COVID. And yesterday, many of us have sort of relived some of those experiences when we saw images that came on different media, and that probably also in this conference you started with some images. And I must say that it's difficult to believe that, we've been through this in education, especially because what has happened is, like it's happened in other sectors also, but some irrevocable, some kinds of decisions have been taken and a certain trend has been set in. We know, for instance, how the policy came in. A policy that was in the making for 6 years suddenly came in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, without a parliamentary session, without a discussion. And it has now altered even sort of some substantial, rules and norms, including what it's trying to do is that it's trying to change the federal structure of states, because the federal structure of the center-state relationship in education we know is a concurrent subject, and we know that states make their policies. Very crucial decisions are taken by states, including the curriculum, including recruitment. But what has happened is that now, as this policy tried to state in its document, in fact, it was shocking when in 2019, it actually came up with the setting up of a National Education Commission, a permanent commission to be chaired by the PM. And then when there was a lot of objection to that in the Central Advisory Board Committee, they tried to say, okay, chaired by the Education Minister, but that doesn't change much. And what was curious was that even as the National Education Policy was being approved by the cabinet, the document that was circulated to the media, it said for circulation. It had come from the ministry, and the document that political commentators were using the same evening actually said that there was a National Education Commission in place. So its own, and some of us who were sort of invited to write about it, we were waiting for the final policy document to be put up on the website. It came after 2 days. And when it came, then this was thankfully removed. But you can see what was happening. The idea that you can just ram through something which is not in consonance with the Constitution could be done to the point of approving a document.
Yeah, finish question arrest. Kindly guide the thing.
Some problem seems to have happened.
Yeah, we've lost her. Let's wait for a minute. Probably log out and log in again. Yeah, there we are.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see why this was happening. Okay, so so this entire, I was saying that the two major thrusts in this 1 year and in the new policy coming in are, one, centralization, and which it contradicts the Constitution at many places, and consolidation, which means that you, even in the last 2 months, we have seen that thousands of schools being closed down because on the pretext of saying that they are suboptimal and they're not efficient because enrollments are low, but which has meant that 1,000 schools in Odisha, 1,000 schools in Madhya Pradesh, all recently, and mostly in tribal areas, because then we know that these are smaller habitations. We know that they are in any case underserved. So what Niti Aayog had been doing in the last 3-4 years under its own programs has now come as a policy statement. So on the one hand, there is complete sort of giving up on schools and providing access. In fact, it's gone back to this retrograde term called universal access. Why is this retrograde? Because after the right to education came, it is not up to the state to tell us that it's going to endeavor to provide access. It's the fundamental right of a child from April 1st, 2010. And there can be no timelines, there can be no targets set in that. But this policy, again, intriguingly, with a right to education still in place, it's a fundamental right, the policy completely contradicts the right in everything that it says, in the kind of, in trying to say that there will be community teachers, and trying to say that there can be open schooling called multiple models of schooling. You know, there can be an open child attending an open school at grade 3, which is again banned by the Right to Education Act, which says a good quality neighborhood school for every child. So what is happening? How is it using the COVID and using the fact that everything is under clampdown and lockdown, pushing things which are going against a fundamental right or questioning, going against what the Constitution has mandated? That is a larger question for us to ask. But I will also, and what is the third thing that is worrying is that the only mention of the pandemic in this policy comes in section 24, which has been added clearly at the end, which was not there in any draft, which says that, which talks about digital education and online education. And this again is now a kind of thrust, which is so surprising now. I almost want to say that because I thought that we had been resisting this for quite some time. But last week, I was part of two very senior kind of deliberations at the state level. One, I happened to meet the Chief Secretary of a state who had just taken over, and he said that they were facing trouble in finding good teachers and finding good mathematics teachers. And so they have taken a decision that they're going to connect all their schools, especially secondary schools, to satellite TV. And they are in such a hurry that when they contacted IIT Madras and said that they would like them to help them do this technology support, and they were told that it'll take them 1 year, they said they didn't have that time. So they're going to go ahead on their own. And so there are no questions asked. You don't have teachers? Well, we do it through satellite. And he, as a chief secretary, was telling me how mathematics is covered very well by Khan Academy. Again, this is something, I work in science and maths education. I closely have followed what is happening in Khan Academy because Delhi schools and Delhi government did the same thing. It told all its maths teachers, only mathematics, that in online education, you don't have to teach, you just have to switch on the Khan Academy link and then do, provide support and do assignments and things like that. So under this lockdown, there are many serious changes and that are coming in and almost being rammed in. Similarly, in Rajasthan, there was a chief minister's advisory council set up, but we were being asked to talk about education in a separate consultancy. We were shocked because the note that came spoke about equity and inclusion. So one was happy that, this is an issue that is serious because we know that what has happened during the lockdown is going to be seriously, it's going to impact even the gains of the last decades that we have made in terms of getting children to school or students to college. But we were shocked to find that they were only talking of digital education, and equity and inclusion was only in terms of digital education. So this again is something that one needs to now come to terms with. When I think of the images that still sort of, they still shock us and they still sort of move us and tell us what has happened in this 1 year. I'll talk of just 2, 3 images that still, that stay with me. And in fact, when I look at Aishwarya Reddy's photograph, the student from Lady Shri Ram College, I mean, an exceptional case. Things don't happen like this. She, against all odds, this girl from a small town in Telangana had secured 98.5% marks in her class 12 boards, got admission to study mathematics, something very rare that doesn't happen as much in, in education. And her father is a motorcycle mechanic, her mother a tailor. They had mortgaged their small 1-bedroom house just to allow her to reach Delhi and to follow her dream. And they could not, because of this, they could not continue to support her younger sister in class 8, who dropped out of school. So this was her, she had just completed her first year, and it took a devastating toll. I mean, when I look at her photograph, it's difficult for me to not get completely taken up by, by the shock, because I feel someone who was here, just here, part of us, part of Delhi University, I almost feel like she was a student of ours. It's like a collective responsibility. Were we not listening? What were we doing? I mean, it's true that the anxieties have taken their toll. It's true that, the digital classes has dismembered social solidarities and has deepened these existing divides while the system continues business as usual. But why was it? Because when she told the Students' Union that she could not keep up with her studies, she could not keep up with assignments on her phone, she was having trouble in connectivity, she asked her father just a week back to buy her a second-hand laptop. And he said he had no money, he'd lost his job. So, I mean, this for her was really being completely sort of pushed to the end of her tether, and she hanged herself. She, it's so, it's almost traumatic to listen to what her father says when he says that she fed him that day. She fed him with her hands. And she said she didn't feel like eating. And she just went to her room and she took her life. I mean, what kind of struggles have we seen, and what do we understand by a student? I mean, if we had just listened, a well-resourced college like Lady Shri Ram, if we had just got a call from, to get second-hand laptops, there would have been thousands of second-hand laptops that were available. Why did we not listen to this voice? Why were we not even conscious about what our students were going through? So this is something that will remain with us for a long, long time. Also, what she said in the end in her note was heartrending. She says, my family has been spending a lot of money on me. My studies are a burden on them, but I cannot live without my studies. So another image that haunts me and will haunt us is that of this young Dalit girl, 15-year-old girl, Jyoti Kumari Paswan, who had dropped out of school before she finished her class 10, but she had come to Gurgaon to help nurse her father, who was a migrant auto rickshaw driver. For 20 years, he had been working here, but he was injured and she had come to help him. And when the lockdown struck, they were left with no money, no food, no accommodation. So what is it that she could do? She borrowed some money, bought a second-hand cycle, and she cycled 1,200 kilometers with her father sitting on the behind her on the carrier. And with all the passing taunts, with all the comments, with absolutely nothing else to to take her, to support her, she continued going 100 kilometers a day for 10 days till she reached home, and hearteningly got a lot of support. People fed them, people supported them. But when the media covered her, and it was nice to know that because the media gave her a lot of coverage, she got some support. But till 2 months back, she said that yes, her mother said, her mother is a cook in an Anganwadi, And her mother said the things seem to have changed a lot in these few months, because earlier people who never even came and spoke to us now come home and have tea with us, even though they recognize that we are Dalits. So, that kind of a media acknowledgement and media of her agency and what she had done had found some, some support, but she had not managed to get readmission in class 10 in her school. So, these are the kinds of things. We also found another young girl, Jamalu Maktam, age 12, from a tribal village in Chhattisgarh, who for the first time had to go out looking for work. And she went with some women of her village in a chili farm in about 150 kilometers away in Telangana. The lockdown struck. Again, struck, no wages, no food, no transport, completely abandoned. She walked back through forests with the group of people. After 3 days, she died. She died in the forest, and they just said exhaustion and electrolyte imbalance. So, I mean, these images must continue to remind us of the kinds of struggles that children have faced, on what education has meant. I mean, Aishwarya's words, I can't live without my studies. What are we going to do to support, to offer our commitment, to offer our solidarity? There are millions of more such students. And in fact, in the lockdown, what happens is that women get more affected, because normally going out to study helps them resist a lot of patriarchal pressures from home. But when they're sitting at home, we know that domestic violence, and we know that domestic chores and child marriage, I mean, all these things have grown. No one has estimates. We've heard from studies which have normally been carried out only through the telephone, but we don't really know what's going to happen. A lot of educators are telling us it's not just a loss of 1 year, it's a loss of a generation. It's a generational loss. How do we look at this now? Now, with the new budget coming in, there is a stark budget cut in education, in sort of significant areas of education. So what is it that this meant? What is it, this policy, with the rhetoric of equity and the rhetoric of a lot of other things, access to universal education, which means nothing, by the way, because we don't need access, we need a right, at least till the age 14. So what does it mean now to look at this? More than that, what is worrying is that we find that these systems are not going to go in for, there is nothing for teacher education in the budget. There is nothing to support, even in terms of adult literacy. There is nothing in the policy, and complete shutdown of the National Literacy Mission in the last 1 year. State resource centers have been shut. We are now hearing from states, some states, that on their own, states think that they must take up and support literacy efforts, but with a lot of private agencies coming in. In fact, even in the budget, if you notice, whereas Navodaya Vidyalayas are some of the best resourced models of public schools, of government schools, but the government has given permission for Ekalavya schools, which are now run by the tribal department. It has given permission for Sainik schools, so we know where the thrust is. And these Ekalavya schools now are going ahead. Again, recently, by chance, I found from one state, they're going ahead with all kinds of so-called philanthropic organizations. So there are a lot of private organizations coming in, including Sri Ram and Shankar, and all kinds of organizations with no sort of policy mandate as to how do you decide which organization can come and run a major school, because the budget for that is about 35 crore or more, which the government is going to spend and is going to allow these philanthropic partners to come and run the school. So major decisions and major diversions in terms of where funds were expected and where they will be going in this budget. Plus, what is a matter of concern is that this policy clearly now sets out to push for divisions in terms of who can get what quality of education. And there are no qualms about it. It also says 50% of school children will go in for vocational education, just as 50% of college students will go in for vocational education. We know what that vocational education is. There is no education. There is only a set of skills worked out, the curriculum syllabus worked out by the industry. So why do they call it education in the first place? But there is a major restructuring of the school system, again done with no discussion, no rationale. Why are the last 4 years of school clubbed together? Because till now there is a policy which says that vocational education can only be offered after class 10, because for 10 years, you really want students to have an equivalent program, an equivalent curriculum. But now in the last 1 year, what is being shifted is that students will be pushed into vocational education. And we know that vocational education is tied to caste, whereas the policy doesn't ever talk about caste. The word doesn't come in the policy. It just clubs everyone under SEDG, socio-economically disadvantaged groups. So what does it mean? And under the special education zones, you find that what exists even today in terms of elementary education has been diluted, because you talk of community members coming in, you talk of children from a school tutoring other children. So the complete mandate of a fundamental right is gone, and we know what is coming. At the higher education level, we have seen the last decade or 2 decades bring in much more, many more students. We've seen kind of close parity coming in between girls and boys, between women and men. We have seen that, students who want to come and study are being pushed into open and distance learning because there are no colleges. But this policy now says it, that the natural path for higher education would be through open and distance learning. So even though the All India Survey for Higher Education tells us in 2019 that 11% of the total enrollments were in ODL, open and distance learning, this policy is going to push for much more. So there is no commitment to actually provide good quality higher education for students. And again, we know what that means. If you're pushed into open and distance learning, just like you were during the pandemic, what kind of effect it has on which children, which students, and especially on women. So during this period, when we were looking at the statistics, we also found that, for instance, in higher education, even though at the national average in 2019, the large 60% of enrollments are in the rural areas, though mostly 80% of those colleges are privately managed. The policy is pushing for consolidation and saying a college must have enrollment of 3,000 and above. The last statistics tell us that just barely 4% colleges had that enrollment. During this pandemic, when Ravish was in fact covering certain colleges to tell us what was the status of colleges even in states that were going for elections, he showed us in Dumka district, which is a progressive district in education, he showed us the case of a women's college, which has an enrollment of 12,000. But what was shocking was, and shocking because till now, this just hasn't come up in the public. I mean, there's no outrage over this. The college has just about 6 to 8 rooms. The college has only about 10 faculty members, and 12,000 students are enrolled in science, also in science courses. And these women were telling us that they don't have classes, so they go to tuition. So they're enrolled in a college which under the norms is a very good 12,000 enrolled college with 12,000 women enrolled, which is a farce, which takes people in for BSc sciences without having a science teacher or a lab. So what does this mean? Already we know that we have been playing these games in terms of enrollments. Students want to come in for education, but are being pushed into coaching. We know who benefits from that. And now when the policy says that only colleges will have to, those which are more than 3,000, in the last figure, there were 4% of such colleges. What are we going to expect now? So where is the commitment for higher education, and where are these students going to be pushed into? Already, we have seen this happening. These are sort of major concerns. Besides, of course, what is happening in terms of students in this period being arrested, students being charged with all kinds of sedition and with all kinds of sort of, trumped up charges that have with absolutely no recourse to law or to no recourse to bail. So what is the policy telling us? On the one hand, it talks about autonomy, and we know that autonomy actually is a responsibility of the state to ensure democracy and to ensure that students have the right to speak and study. But yet now what autonomy means. It's going to push people in for financial autonomy. It's going to push colleges to try and raise their own funds, which already we've seen that happening. So what does it tell us about all this coming together? And secondly, we also know that in terms of trying to get colleges, in autonomy, we know what has just happened with someone like Pratap Bhanu Mehta. So what faith do we have in this rhetoric? What faith do we have in this document, which 66-page document, which is giving us a lot of rhetoric, and every day, and they have started implementing it in a central manner. They have appointed people in states. One nodal officer in the state is supposed to answer 350 clauses. There are 350 items on which implementation has been started, completely centralized. So assessments completely centralized, curriculum centralized, implementation of the policy centralized. We know that. I just want to take 1 minute on an example from what happened during the COVID. What kind of curriculum was given to schools? The CBSE, the NCERT had made an alternative academic curriculum, and in history, in class 11, 12. They had of course said that the document says that everyone in India has a phone, period. So, and it says those who don't have smartphones can use this, can get, parents can help students through SMSs. What education happens through SMSs? But the way they wrote the curriculum was interesting. So they said parents can download last 5 years of question papers based on these themes and ask children to practice for their exam. So parents, let's look at all our parents. Look at the 1 crore migrants or more who have been displaced, who've gone home. Look at all this happening. And this is what, at the same time, this is what NCERT is saying. In its course on political science, there's a theme called equality for class 11. And this in week 4, this is the curriculum for that theme on equality. It says, prepare a chart on schemes and programs that address inequality related to enrollment, achievement of learners at the secondary level of education. This is an assignment, not an assignment. This is the way you're doing online education in class 11. Second, write an essay on equality as a principle and as practice. 3, make a comic strip. Make a comic strip on inequalities in your neighborhood. 4, write a short note on gender equality as a stepping stone for democracy. So this is what this is what the pandemic online education was telling class 11 students about equality. And we know what they were facing while all this was happening. Thank you.